welcome back to BBC News. We've just received updates on the protests that have been taking over Tehran since Saturday morning. The demonstrations are a result of Ahmadinejad's election to the presidency in Iran, despite previous polls that put Mir Hossein Mousavi comfortably in the lead. Ahmadinejad is infamous for his strict conservatism that limits social freedoms, criticizes the West and particularly the US, and has led to significant domestic inflation. Protesters flooding the streets of Tehran are calling for the election to be nullified. Today, Mousavi has rallied hundreds of thousands of his supporters and officially labeled the protest the Green Movement in a tribute to the symbol of his presidential campaign. Upwards of 200 protesters have been arrested, including many reformist leaders. So far, the government response has not raised any other serious flags. Good afternoon, London. Today I have with me political expert Ali Karabic, here to analyze how the Green Movement in Iran has unfolded over the last 6 months. Ali, could you first briefly summarize the developments that have occurred?
Thanks for having me. When the Green Movement first erupted, the citizens led by Mr. Mousavi were initially called for the annulment of the presidential election of 2009. Over time, however, as the movement gained more traction, its goals were expanded. Protesters called for greater democracy, less religion in politics, and more reform in general.
How has the response of the government evolved since the beginning of the movement?
When Mousavi and his supporters accused the election as being fraudulent, the government defended itself. The supreme leader, Khamenei, accepted Ahmadinejad's presidency and attempted to convince the citizens to do so as well. Little violence was used during the initial protests. Instead, protesters and their leaders were arrested. However, as the movement became more popular, the government response became more oppressive. For example, there have also been reports that prisoners are tortured and reside in incredibly harsh conditions. This crackdown has gradually diminished public demonstrations, and by 2010, little activity is occurring.
Finally, how do you see the Green Movement affecting Iranian politics hereafter?
Well, the Green Movement is not officially over, but its supporters are still not unified. Mousavi is set on reworking the constitution, while others are calling for a revolution. It is also unclear whether Mousavi will gain legitimate power in Iran or if the government will thwart him. The lack of consensus makes for a foggy future, so we will have to wait and see whether they can unite to make a difference in Iran.
Recently, Iranian opposition leaders Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi called for renewed protests in solidarity with demonstrators in Egypt and Tunisia. The government responded by arresting dozens of activists and journalists, as well as shutting down opposition websites. The houses of both Mousavi and Karoubi are currently surrounded by security officials to prevent them from attending the protests, and all phone communications have been cut off.
Protesters have reappeared in Tehran, chanting "Death to the dictator" in reference to both Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and the President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. This is the Iranian opposition's first attempt in more than a year to hold street protests against the government. Small groups of people have succeeded gathering in the main squares leading to Azadi, or Freedom Square. The besieged militia used tear gas against the protesters, as well as utilizing their batons and opening fire to scatter them. The commander of the besieged accuses the West of instigating the protests. So far, one person has been reported dead, dozens have been injured, and at least 250 protesters have been arrested. It seems as if the Green Movement has a surge of new energy and has become even more radical than it was in the summer and fall of 2009.
Well, those Iranians are at it again. We received word that there is more protesting going on in Iran, only this time it involves the U.S. directly. Tens of thousands of protesters have crowded the streets surrounding the former U.S. Embassy in Iran, protesting President Hassan Rouhani's meeting with President Obama regarding the impending nuclear negotiations. People are chanting "Death to America" throughout the streets. Pictures of Obama and the American flag are being burned and trampled. Banners reading "We trample America under our feet" and "The U.S. is the great Satan" are proliferating wildly. Ali has some more details on this situation.
I think they hope to be sending a message to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei to put pressure on him to reconsider his support for Rouhani's communication with the U.S. After Rouhani returned from his meeting with Obama last month, the opponents have made it clear that they see U.S. as a country looking to weaken Iran. Khamenei denounced any attempts to undermine Rouhani's endeavor. Security forces were dispatched to control the demonstrators. Other government responses were surprisingly limited, alluding to the possibility that influential politicians neglected to handle the situation due to the dissatisfaction with Rouhani's actions.
Good evening, London. I'm here once again with Ali Kravik, here to tell us how protests in Tehran relate to Iranian political culture.
Thanks, Caroline. It's good to be back. I'll start with the Green Movement. This event, among other factors, indicates that the Iranian people value their right to vote, or at least they did in 2009. A record voter turnout in Iran occurred in that election. Around 85% of the population went to the polls, an unprecedented amount. After so many citizens put so much value into their vote, they felt betrayed after receiving results that seemed fraudulent. So they turned to a new form of interest articulation: protest. The brutal crackdown on the Green Movement towards the end of its first run has also decreased the legitimacy of the government in the public eye. The 2011 and 2013 protests, of course, demonstrate the strong anti-American sentiment among Iranians, as well as the lack of trust they possess in the West. Protesting has been part of the Islamic Republic of Iran since its inception, and will likely continue to play a strong role in its politics.
Thanks for the great insights, Ali. I'm Carol McGowan, and this was BBC World News. Have a good night.